death. By design. A plan to destroy a whole race.
Sometimes they kill like 50 people, and sometimes 100 people.
Or the ultimate form of revenge.
Pieces of them came down, all of them.
It's a ritual to appease the gods.
He lost his life because there was an imperative there that he should die.
Or the only way to reach God.
I started to see the bodies on mattresses on the floor. These were my friends.
The taking of life is sometimes a solemn rite.
He explained it to us in that Jesus was ready to go home.
We're going on to something greater and better, and that we hope that someday you will understand this and you might join us.
Sometimes it's a cold, calculated plan.
They already start killing people in front of us. If we show any emotion, they will kill us in the spot.
Ritual killings even take place in America's heartland.
There was nothing to gain from killing my father. It was strictly pride, but that was enough.
He was literally blown to pieces.
And they've been with us for thousands of years.
He died a painful and frightening death. And we really do owe it to him to find out why that happened.
Ritual human sacrifice seems to be as old as civilization itself. Archaeologists working in Sudan have found evidence of ritual killings dating back 7,000 years. 4 millennia ago in China, the emperors of the Shang dynasty frequently beheaded military opponents and offered their heads to appease the spirits of their male ancestors. Perhaps the most widespread use of human sacrifice was in the Aztec and Maya cultures of Central America. When the conquistadors arrived at Tenochtitlan, the center of the Aztec universe, they found the steps of its great temple dripping with human blood, and priests wrenching human hearts out of still living victims. The Maya painted their sacrifices blue before plucking out their hearts on a blue altar. After death, temple workers would skin the body and turn the flesh into a macabre coat worn by the priest. Ireland's peat bogs. They once covered a quarter of this country. Local farmers have been digging away at them for centuries, using the peat for fuel and for compost. But the bogs have dark secrets. In 2003, Kevin Barry was digging a drainage ditch near the town of Old Crowan, about 40 miles from Dublin.
On that morning we started digging on a drain just like what you have there, and this is what we're excavating, just like this. And as we went a bit further along, we went a bit deeper, down to about 3 foot depth. And that's when we realised. First it looked like a dead animal. And then when we came down close to it, we could see the hand. And it was so well preserved, it looked like it was only there maybe 10, 20 years, you know.
The area was declared a crime scene by the police, but forensic tests showed that the body was 2,000 years old. These were the remains of an Iron Age Celt. The case was referred to investigators at the National Museum of Ireland. Ned Kelly, head keeper of Irish antiquities, took charge of the body, whom he called Old Crowan Man.
The most amazing thing about Old Crowan Man were these huge arms and hands. You could see that Old Crowan Man had been a big, powerful man. The preservation of the hands was such that the texture, it was like touching any person's hand, and it was difficult to realize that this was somebody who had died more than 2,000 years ago.
Hundreds of Iron Age bodies have been found in the bogs of Northern Europe. The dense peat is an ideal environment for preserving human remains. Denmark's Toland Man is the best preserved, but this serene expression belies a brutal death. He was hanged. every single Iron Age bog body was ritually killed. Lindoman, found in England, was garroted, stabbed, and received a blow that crushed his skull. Old Crone Man was no exception.
You can see the little grooves and dents in the body, as if he was pierced, sort of pinned down with timber pegs. He was tortured alive.
The fatal wound that killed Old Crone Man is actually a wound to his chest. He was stabbed with a sword, with a small Iron Age sword, but he saw the fatal blow coming and he raised his arm like that to ward it off, and he has an injury on his arm, so he tried to defend himself, but he was then stabbed through the chest and through the heart. It was a fatal injury.
But Old Crone's death was more unusual than those of most bogmen. His head and lower body were separated at the time of his sacrifice.
This is a real person here, you know. He was only a young man, 25, and he died a painful and frightening death. And we really do owe it to him to find out why that happened.
Forensic analysis of the bogman's hands gave Kelly his first clue.
By analysing his fingernails, we were able to tell that he had a meat-rich diet. We know that he would have died at the end of winter because a meat-rich diet is a winter diet.
In Celtic tradition, the beginning of spring was when sacrifices were normally made to the mother goddess. But the hands of Old Crone Man made it hard to believe this was a routine sacrifice of some low-ranking villager for the good of the clan.
We examined the hands of Old Crone Man, and they are absolutely without blemish. This was a man who did not do a day's work in his life.
Only a figure of high social status could afford not to work in the fields. But why would clan members sacrifice a high-ranking figure? Ned Kelly began to see a pattern. Just 3 months before Old Crone Man saw the light of day, a peat-cutting machine had brought this body to the surface. Cloney Cavan Man also died a brutal death. His skull was split open by a sharp implement.
The extraordinary thing about Cloney Cavan Man is he has this very interesting hairstyle. It's like a Mohican. And the hair is actually held in place with a hair gel made using a resin from a pine tree that grows in the borders between France and Spain. So clearly Cloney Cavan Man is also a person of high status. These are important people. They're not criminals who have been taken out to be killed or anything like that.
In 2005, Irish archaeologists found another clue to the bogmen's identity, an ancient Celtic treasure trove.
We have gold collars, we have horned helmets, bracelets, we have beautiful leather capes. There's weapons, swords and spears and shields. This would be the garments worn by a king on the day of his inauguration.
Could Old Crone Man and Cloney Cavan Man be kings? And if so, what would drive their subjects to brutally sacrifice them? 2,000 years ago, these peat bogs were the scene of grisly human sacrifice. Archaeologist Ned Kelly has been trying to discover who the sacrificial victims were. The hands of Old Crone Man and the hair of Cloney Cavan Man seem to indicate they were some of the wealthiest members of their society. Then scientists at the Irish Museum performed an analysis of Old Crone Man's stomach.
Surprisingly, his stomach contents were present, and we were able to analyse his last meal. And he had a final meal of cereals and buttermilk.
This may not seem like a remarkable meal, but for Ned Kelly, it was a pivotal clue.
We know that the early Irish historical texts say the role of the king is to marry the goddess of sovereignty, which is the land, and thereby ensure a supply of corn and milk for his people. So it may be that Old Crone Man is a deposed king who has been sacrificed as an offering. He fell down on the ground. His head was removed, his body was cut in half. Different parts of his body were taken to different parts of the bog. He lost his life because there was an imperative there that he should die.
Old Crowan Man lived in an age where one bad crop could wipe out an entire clan. People would do anything to ensure the land gave them what they needed, including sacrificing their king.
Kings who have failed to deliver, they insult the goddess, and so they must die.
A clan's choice to brutally kill its king only served to ensure his place in history, while his killers are long forgotten. Some ritual killings are the final act of both the murdered and the murderer. One of the first cases of ritual suicide took place 2,000 years ago in the desert fortress Masada. Hundreds of members of the Jewish cult, the Zealots, took their own lives rather than submit to the Roman army. In medieval Japan, the samurai perfected a particularly painful method of suicide. Seppuku required inserting a sword into one's own belly, thrusting it up, and then rapidly left and right. Some samurai would engage the help of another swordsman to decapitate them right after seppuku, to free them from the agony. The Zealots and the samurai both felt that the sacrifice of their own lives was necessary in order to preserve their beliefs.
What suicide cults all share in common is a kind of we-they mentality. We are the elect of the higher power, and the outside world is evil, threatening.
However, ritual suicide continued in Japanese tradition long after the samurai code passed away. In 1944, at the end of World War II, some 5,000 Japanese soldiers committed suicide during the final hours of the battle for Saipan. In the last half-century, suicide cults have been more active than at any time in history. 1978, Jim Jones, founder of the People's Temple, convinces 900 followers to drink cyanide. 1993, David Koresh, founder of Branch Davidians, sets his compound on fire in Waco, Texas, leaving 74 dead.
Mainstream religion and cults differ in many ways. There are boundaries between what is your family or personal life and your religious life. In cults, these lines are blurred. There are no boundaries, and the leader may intrude in any area of a person's life.
Give up everything that you have of this world. Get rid of it. Give it to the poor. Come and follow me.
All through my life, I've been basically a spiritual seeker. I figured if there's only one God, then why isn't there just one belief system that helps you with the truth?
Rio D'Angelo, a.k.a. Richard Ford, was born in 1954 in Southern California. He became a successful graphics designer and sculptor after graduating from art college.
I could do a lot of different things: sculpting, painting, designing, fabricating. I did a lot of things in the film industry. But still, my truth wasn't found yet.
Rio's truth was knocking on his door when he came across a group who later would call themselves Heaven's Gate. Its leader and founder was Marshall Herff Applewhite, a former music teacher from Alabama. He dreamt up a new religion and renamed himself Doe.
It was down in Marina del Rey, and there was about 50 people, and there was 9 people that were in the front of the room at a long table. And they handed out these large tabloid-sized statements, they call them, basically describing their belief system, that the earth was designed as a garden to grow souls, and there was a harvest about to happen. It was strange for me when I started to read the statement because it felt like I knew it already. And that's where the epiphany started. They told me that they would teach me how to become non-human. And this was a little tricky in my brain. I said, well, how can a person who's in a human body teach you how to be non-human?
I'm from Kingdom Level Above Human.